we're ready to go. So I'm Nelson, a bit like Nelson Mandela, Nelson. And today we're going to learn how to play bingo. Put your hand up if you've ever played bingo before. Okay, good. All right, we're going to play birthday bingo. So I'm going to shout out a number, and if you were born on that date, I want you to put your hand up. 27. Okay? 11. 19. Wow, I really chose the worst numbers there. But what we just did there is a bit like how L&D works in a lot of companies. By the time you've gone through those checks, you've convinced yourself you've just built a masterpiece of an e-learning course. And then you decide to push it out. And that moment where you push it out to the entire company is a bit like when I was shouting out random numbers to you. Because when you push it out to the whole company, you don't know whether someone has that need at that particular time, and that course is the right course to deliver on the need they have at that time. So a lot of companies play L&D bingo, and when you get the numbers right and someone puts their hand up, you've got a match. And that's when you've managed to deliver the right knowledge to someone at the right time to drive that right impact. But as we've just learned here, most of the times the numbers don't match. And every time the numbers don't match, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, and you're wasting resources of your organization because it's not engaging with the people that you've designed it for. And so why are we losing at L&D bingo? Now, every time you lose at L&D bingo, you have what is the engagement gap. Now, the engagement gap is basically the primary requirement for any type of learning to happen in your company is engagement. If people are not engaging with your L&D offering, everything else that follows doesn't matter, right? And this problem, the engagement gap, is more common than you think. Let me tell you how common. In 2020, organizations spent more than the GDP of 160 countries on L&D. That's a lot of money. Yet, in the same year, when employees were surveyed, 75% said they were dissatisfied with their company's L&D offering. Only 12% said they actually used any of the skills they got in their jobs. And 60% of the employees would never ever recommend their L&D opportunities. So what that tells you is there was a lot of time and money wasted, and there was a lot of people losing at L&D bingo. So why are so many companies losing at L&D bingo? Why are they not matching up the numbers? It's all because of this fish. I'll tell you what. What often companies do is year after year, they pump more and more money into content, right? They think by getting more interactive and fun e-learning courses, they're all of a sudden going to make their L&D offering far more effective. But what they're forgetting about is the water. And the water in this case is context. And context within an organization is your social norms. What do you guys do when you fail? How do you celebrate wins? What are the job roles? What are the skills you have and don't have in your organization? There's a lot of moving parts that make up the context within your organization. Now, much like how fish out of water don't really last that long, the same way when you design content that completely disregards the context, it doesn't go that far. And this is why we have the engagement gap. Is right now when we design these learning experiences and our L&D offering, we're only thinking about the fish, we're not thinking about the water. So we're essentially designing dead learning experiences that never had a chance in the first place. So this session today is for us to work out how do we connect the right content to the right person at the right time to drive the right impact that we want. How do we think about the fish in water and win at L&D bingo? Now, is everyone ready to learn how to play L&D bingo and win? Yeah? Yeah? Good. Let's hold that suspense while I tell you who I am. So, I'm Nelson Sivalingam. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at HowNow. If you look to my right, that's us. That's my team waving at you. And so we're basically, in summary, we're your LMS replacement, and you'll find out why when you go to that stand after this talk. I'm also the author of this book here. It'll be in a bookstore near you on the 3rd of June, where it talks about how, as an organization, what frameworks and tactics you can use to accelerate the speed at which your organization learns. I'm also the host in a podcast called L&D Disrupt. If you're not sick of my voice by the end of this talk, then I definitely recommend listening to it, because the guests on the show are amazing. Now, that's enough about me. Let's go to step 1 at winning L&D Bingo. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question, which is, when was the last time you learned something that had a significant impact on your career? So I want you to take a moment to think about that last thing you learned that had a significant impact on your career. All right, you thought about it? Yeah? Okay, now I'm going to ask you, did it come from a book? Put your hand up if it came from a book. Put your hand up if it came, put your hand up if it came from a podcast. Put your hand up if it came from a blog. Put your hand up if it came from someone you spoke to at work, a colleague, an expert. Great. Put your hand up, what else am I missing? Yeah, a webinar, let's go with that. All right, okay. Give me some options. What else have I missed out that you got from? Anyone willing to share? Go on, someone. Tell me, where did you get it from? All right, how many of you got it from an e-learning course that you took? That's great. That's great, because most of you are going to go back and either buy or build e-learning courses, so it's quite ironic. But there's 2 things we can learn from this. First thing we can learn from that research we just did is most of the learning we do doesn't live in your LMS. Then why do we spend so much time and money on LMS? When we read books, we read blogs, we listen to podcasts, we speak to our colleagues, we learn from each other, none of that lives in the LMS. Yet, we're all going to go buy an LMS. We're in a room full of them. That's the first thing we can learn from that. The second thing we can learn from that is, with or without L&D, people are still going to learn. Right? Now, don't worry, this is not where I say why you should change your career and have a crisis. No, in fact, it's the opposite. Now, L&D are far more critical than ever before, because learning is so scattered across your ecosystem. It's no longer about a single platform. We've just explained a few different ways we can learn. It's a very fragmented, scattered, huge ecosystem. Someone needs to bring this ecosystem together. It's a bit like the conductor of an orchestra, right? It's one of the most visible jobs in the world, yet no one knows what the conductor does. Right? Can't the musicians play without a conductor? Of course they can. But with a conductor, they're in harmony, they're in sync, they play to the right timing. L&D teams are the conductor of the learning ecosystem. People can learn without L&D, but they'll learn far more efficiently with L&D being the conductor of the learning ecosystem. So what's in the ecosystem? The learning ecosystem is a network of experts, skills, content from inside and outside of the organization that you bring together. Here are a few examples. Right now, most of the effort goes into formal learning, your courses, your e-learning content libraries, etc. But look at everything else that's not being covered. Mentoring, coaching, learning from your peers, collaborative learning through simulations, hackathons, cohort-based courses, job aids that live already in your internal systems like SharePoint, Google Drive, any knowledge bases that you have. Informal learning that we spend most of our time on, blogs, podcasts, all of these things that we spend most of our time on. Right now, if you have a traditional LMS, you're missing out on all of this that lives in your ecosystem. And that's why customers use HowNow to integrate with that ecosystem and bring it together into a single place to reduce the friction, both for you and the end user, to be able to find the learning they need. So step 1 of winning L&D Bingo is to bring your learning ecosystem together. Now the second one is to personalize. Now you've got the content, how do you connect the right content to the right person? Now this is where you're probably familiar with the idea of push and pull learning. Now push learning gets a bad rep, right? There's a lot of people out there going, all learning should be self-directed, it should all be pull learning.
We disagree with that. Because when you do self-directed learning, it's great when I'm aware of my gaps, right? But what about the things you don't know? This is where L&D can help, by bringing attention to things that I'm unaware of in the first place. So push learning the way it's currently done, yes, it's terrible, but it can be done well. And this is where L&D can really learn to think like marketing. Let's think like marketing for a moment. Let's imagine I'm the owner of a high-protein smoothie company, right? I can either market to everyone who drinks anything, right? Or I could market to people who go to the gym before and after work, haven't got time to make a great meal, and therefore I target them with a smoothie that's going to fill them up, it's nutritious, and it's high protein. Which one do you think will get more conversions? Rhetorical question, it's the latter. Right now, what L&D do is the first thing. I've made a course, I'm going to give this to everyone who's ever going to take a course. But what we're not doing in L&D is using the data we have available in the company to be able to segment that target audience and connect the right people with the right content. What data? I'll give you some examples. Skills data. For example, companies use HowNow to measure the skills they have in the company and segment their target audience based on who has what skills. So I could target someone that has less than a level 3 proficiency level in leadership, for example. I could use data from the HR system. For example, if my previous career, I have Salesforce experience, what's the point of sending me to a beginner's Salesforce course? I've been using it for the last 5 years of my life. That data, the company and talent data we already have in the organization, isn't used enough. Not just that kind of data, but we can use behavioral data. Let's say, for example, we're trying to tackle burnout, right? Great data you can use is data of people who are sending messages out of hours. Use that data to segment people who need to be recommended on time management and how to better manage their productivity. There's so much data that exists in the organization that we're not using to segment that audience. Now that's how you can personalize push. Now with pool learning, this is where, if you've ever sat on Netflix, you've scrolled for about 30 minutes, and after scrolling for 30 minutes, you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch another episode of Friends for the 1000th time, because I can't be asked to find something. You know what decision fatigue feels like. And that's what L&D are doing to employees every time you dump 1 million courses on them and say, go figure. How L&D can help with self-directed learning is through curation. I'm gonna give you 3 steps to curate. Put your hand up if you've ever made a mixtape. The rest of you either look a lot older than you are, or younger rather, or you're lying to me. But anyway, those of you who've owned up to making a mixtape, we're going to talk about the 3 steps of making a mixtape. The first one is aggregate. This is when you gather all the songs that your high school sweetheart loves. In the L&D equivalent, this is when you pull together your Twitter feeds, your blogs, your podcasts, your YouTube channels. This is when you aggregate and gather all of these useful resources that are relevant to your organization. So step 1 of curation is aggregate. Step 2 is filter. This is when, out of the songs that you've gathered, this is when you pick out the songs that have a special meaning. The song that was playing when you were on your first date in a food court. That song that was playing when you had your first dance at the prom. Right? You pick out those songs from the songs you've gathered. The L&D equivalent here is this is where you pick out content that is relevant from that. It's where you separate the critical learning from the crap. Here's how you can use a learning platform to do that. With HowNow, you can track likes, comments, who's sharing what, who's engaging with what content. That gives you an idea of filtering the critical from the crap. So first step, aggregate. Second step, filter. The last step is enrich. This is when, you've done it, when you're putting together that mixtape and you record that special intro before each song. This is why I included this song. That's what that is. You give it a little context, the story behind that song. Why did you pick that song? What does it mean to you? The equivalent in L&D is this is when you add additional context. Here is a generic blog for every industry, but here's how this blog is relevant to your team. Here's how this blog is relevant to our sector. In HowNow, we have highlights and annotations. So you can highlight and annotate your favorite parts that are relevant to everyone within the learning platform. So that's how you connect the right content to the right person. Step 3, timing is often missed. It's like if you sent someone off on a course to go learn how to use Excel 3 months before they've ever used Excel, so they don't know how this fits in together. What's the point? So it's about connecting the right content with the right person in the moments that matter. So what do we mean by moments that matter? The moments that matter are when you connect the right content with me in a moment that matter, it shapes my performance. To give you an example of a micro moment, imagine I'm on a call, a sales call, and the customer asks me a question that I don't know the answer for. Being able to access relevant knowledge in that call is a micro moment that matters, because that knowledge can shape my performance in that moment. A macro moment that matters is, imagine I've just been made a first-time manager. So in my career, that's a macro moment that matters, and with the right guidance, the right support, the right learning, you can shape how I perform as a first-time manager. So you design for these moments, and often you find 6 factors that determine a moment that matters. I'll quickly run through them. So physical environment. So say, for example, you're working with people who are in a factory or manufacturing plant, for example, and it's a dark environment. There's no point creating video content if they work in a dark environment. Why not use audio content? Right? So you design the learning experience based on their physical environment. Activity. What are they doing at that time? Like I said, are they on a sales call? If they're on a sales call, what do they have access to? Right? There's no point sending them an hour-long e-learning course when they need to be able to access that knowledge when they're in a call with a customer. Organization. Do you have the culture? Right? Do you have the psychological safety for someone to be able to openly make mistakes? For someone to be able to ask their colleagues, can you help me with this? Do people have the confidence to be able to share what they know with other people? External environment. What's happening in your sector? Right? Has there been a new regulation? Is there a new competitor? Is that the prompt? Is that the moment that matters? Time. How much time do they have? Right? If they're really busy people, is it really worth having a couple of hour long course? Right? And if they're scheduling regular time, then find out how long that time is. Are they scheduling 30 minutes a week to learn? Then why would you create stuff that's longer than 30 minutes? Because they don't have the time to finish it. And the last one is technology. What do they have access to? Do they have access to Zoom? Are they on a mobile device? If you're in retail, often you don't have your devices on you, so you might have communal iPad. So it's designing those learning experiences, taking into account what technology they have. That's step 3. Now the last one, it's the reason why we do this, is to actually measure the impact. Now this sounds super obvious. The first thing you have to do to be able to measure if you've had an impact is to actually measure. Right? So many L&D teams don't measure. They stop at, have they completed the course? How long do they spend learning? Right? You probably are having a positive impact, but you wouldn't know because you're not measuring. So how do you measure impact? We break that down into 3 types of proof. The first one is proof of knowledge. Now this is what most L&D teams do. Proof of knowledge is when you have a knowledge check, you have a quiz, you have an assessment. The equivalent is if I watched a video of someone cycling, it doesn't mean I know how to cycle. It just means I know what you have to do to cycle, right? And that's what the knowledge check tells me. Oh, you know you need to put your foot on the pedal, oh, you got to push it forward. If they send me a multiple choice quiz, I could probably get that right. But that's not enough. The second one is proof of skill. This is, can I apply that knowledge? So this is when I watch that video of how to ride a bike, then I actually get on a bike and I start to pedal. And so how can you test that? This is where you can use hackathons, simulations, 360 feedback is great for this because other people can evidence whether you are applying what you've learned or not. Right? Stretch assignments, internal projects. Stick one on a project that's something that's going to challenge them, where they can apply what they've learned. The last one is proof of performance. Now we know that I can get on a bike and I can ride it. The question is, can I cycle from A to B? And B is where I want them to get to. Now, how do you measure this? 2 things. Quantitative data. This is where make friends with your business stakeholders. right? If you're trying to improve performance in the sales team, ask the sales team for metrics. What was your sales cycle at this point and what is it now? Oh, it was taking us 9 months before, but now we're doing it in 6 months. But now you might ask me, well, just because it went from 9 to 6 months, does that mean learning saved the day? Well, there's a great way to find out, is you go to qualitative data, speak to people, and if they tell you this learning did influence the way I behave, you then triangulate, use the quantitative data with the qualitative data, enough. That's enough. It's never just going to be L&D as the sole hero, and that's fine, right? And so what you do is use the quantitative and qualitative data to measure the impact. That's step 4. So first step, right content, right person, right time for the right impact. Now, how do you bring this together? This is where we came up with the learning experience Bullseye framework. It's basically like a dartboard, right? So you've got the inner circle, right impact, right time, right person, right content. Now, what do you do with this? You start with the inner circle. This is where you get your team together, get your L&D team together, get your stakeholders in a room, have some coffee and biscuits to dip, and then some Post-its, and you can either use a digital template if you're doing it virtually, or scan this QR code, and you can download it, stick it on a whiteboard. You start with the right impact. What impact are you going to measure? So let's take the example of a sales team who are not hitting their target. What you can do there is the metric we're trying to move is the sales conversion rate. The other metric we're trying to do, and we're going to assess it, is through their pitch test. Right? We're going to get them to pitch, and we're going to give them feedback on how they've done. So that's how we're going to measure impact. From the get-go, measurement isn't an afterthought. You're embedding it in your learning experience from the get-go. Then you go to right time. So what are the moments that matter for a sales rep? It's when they're speaking to a customer. It's when they're in their CRM. It's when they're busy people because they're always on demos. So it tells you that you need to really think about the length of the content. And also, are they a hybrid team? So when you deliver training, there's no point always doing it in the classroom. You have to do it virtual. Maybe you need to have asynchronous learning resources that they can access. Then you go out to right person. So how do you get to the right person? What data are you going to use to segment that person? Yes, they're in the sales team, but not everyone in the sales team needs these learning resources. So you need to use data to segment the people who are underperforming, right? So you use data to segment and target that audience. And then right content. All right, what do they need? It's not just courses, right? Is there a knowledge base? Maybe they're struggling with product answers, and so you need a product FAQ. Maybe they need industry insights. Maybe you need to organize a post-mortem after every sales demo so they can reflect back. But you get the idea here. By having this exercise, you know from the get-go, you've thought about how you're going to connect the right content to the right person at the right time, and you've thought about measuring impact from the beginning. So feel free to try it out. And like I said, companies use, it might sound like a lot, but actually it isn't when you use the right technology to bring your ecosystem together, segment that data. And this is what underpins what we do at HowNow. And so you can essentially, with HowNow, bring your learning ecosystem together into a single place, use your data to segment that target audience, push and pull learning, and you can deliver it to them in the applications they already work, whether that's mobile, whether that's in their CRM, whether that's in their help desk, whether that's on a web app. They can access it wherever they work. And you've got all of the data to measure everything from learning activity to skills development, all in a single platform. You don't need HowNow to do it. We'll make your life easier. But even if you don't, use the LX Bullseye. If you like it, you got any questions, you got any feedback, my email address is nelson@getHowNow.com. If you want to dig in deeper, see what we do, I've got my lovely team with me to the right, and we'll be more than happy to speak to you. Thank you for having me, and great to speak to you. Thank you.